Long ago, in a time before humans even knew the stars, a great alien empire ruled the galaxy with ships that moved faster than light and weapons that could destroy whole planets. In seconds, the empire was feared and respected across thousands of systems. And at the center of it all was something more powerful than any weapon, more mysterious than any god: the Star Throne. The Star Throne stood inside the Crystal Palace on the burning world of Velkerprime, a world where the air shimmered with heat and the ground hummed with ancient power. It was carved from a single piece of black stone that no tool could cut. Its surface was smooth, cold, and covered in glowing lines of unknown language. And deep within the throne was something even the oldest aliens could not explain: a force, a mind, a choice. For 3,000 years, rulers came and tried to sit on the throne. They believed it would give them control over the entire empire, its systems, its machines, its secrets. But each one who touched it was thrown away, or burned alive, or turned into dust before the eyes of their followers. The throne did not speak, it did not move, it stayed cold and dark, as if waiting for something or someone. The High Council tried everything. They sent the strongest warriors, the smartest AI, the oldest minds in the galaxy. But the throne remained silent. It refused them all. And so it became a symbol of power no one could reach. It was worshipped, feared, and locked away behind shields and guards and walls of light. Then came Elias. He was not a king or a general or a rich leader. He was just a human soldier from a small blue planet on the edge of known space, a planet most aliens laughed at Earth. They called it primitive, dirty, backward, a place of war and noise and soft creatures with weak bones and short lives. Elias had arrived with a peace group, part of a mission to help rebuild old stations after the last war. He wore a simple suit and carried no weapons. He had no titles, no special blood, no reason to be remembered. But something happened. He got separated from his team during a storm on Velkerprime. The sand was sharp, and the sky was red with lightning. And when the storm ended, he found himself near the Crystal Palace alone. The guards saw him and laughed. They pointed and joked: a human lost in the halls of kings. They said they called him names in their tongue, words that meant bug rat and nothing. But Elias kept walking. He had no idea what the Star Throne was. He only knew he had to get out of the palace before the next storm hit. And as he walked deeper into the hall, he felt something strange, like a whisper pulling at his bones, like the air was alive, like the walls were watching. He reached the throne room without meaning to. It was huge, the ceiling lost in shadows, the walls covered in carvings of battle stars and kings long dead, and in the center on a wide black platform sat the Star Throne, cold, quiet, waiting. The room fell silent. The guard stopped laughing. No one moved. Elias looked around, confused, then looked at the throne. He thought it was just a chair. He had no idea it was the most dangerous seat in the galaxy, and without asking, without bowing, without fear, he walked forward. The guard shouted, "Stop, do not touch it, you will die." But Elias kept walking. He was tired, his legs hurt. He wanted to rest for just a second, and the throne looked like a good place to sit. He reached the steps and climbed them slowly, each footstep echoing through the hall. The throne watched. The galaxy held its breath, and Elias sat down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the floor trembled. A deep sound like thunder rolled through the palace walls. It shook, lights flickered, air turned heavy and hot. The carvings on the walls lit up in gold and red, and blue lines of energy raced across the floor toward the throne. The throne glowed. The symbols on its surface blazed with light. The black stone turned silver. The air around Elias shimmered, as if the world was changing. The guards fell back in fear. One shouted, "It is alive." Another screamed, "The throne has awakened." And all around the galaxy, machines that had slept for centuries opened their eyes. Towers lit up, ancient codes activated, ships hidden in deep space turned toward one single signal. The throne had chosen. Elias sat, frozen eyes, wide hands gripping the arms of the seat. He did not know what was happening. He only knew he felt something deep inside, something waking up, not just in the throne, but in himself. He looked up. The roof opened to the sky, red clouds spinning above, lightning flashing in wide arcs, and from the heavens a beam of light struck the throne, surrounding Elias in a glow so bright none could look directly at him. The voice came not from the walls, not from the air, but from the throne itself. It was old and deep like time, speaking, and it said just one thing: "He is the one." In that moment across stars and moons and stations and cities, people saw visions in their sleep. They heard the same words they felt a change, something new, something impossible. A human had been chosen. Not by vote, not by blood, not by war, but by the star throne itself. Cut to black. It had chosen a new ruler. The star throne had chosen a human, and the galaxy could not understand why. Some said it was a trick, some believed it was a failure in the system, others whispered it was the end of the old ways and the beginning of something new. Elias had no idea what the throne was or what it had just done. He only knew that everything felt different now. His skin tingled, his mind buzzed with strange thoughts, his heart pounded not from fear, but from something deeper, something he could not name. He stood up from the throne, slowly looking at the glowing arms, the shifting lights, the air still alive around him. The guards who once laughed now stood, frozen eyes, wide hands shaking. Some knelt without knowing why, others backed away, as if seeing a god rise from dust. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He was just a man, a soldier from Earth, a place where people still argued about power and borders and old history. He was not born for this. He never trained for this. He never wanted this. The door behind him opened, and more aliens rushed in, leaders, nobles, tech priests, reporters. They all stopped when they saw him, standing there wrapped in the throne's light. No one knew what to do. No one had seen the throne awake. No one had seen it choose. The High Speaker of Velker Prime pushed forward her long silver robe, dragging behind her, her eyes narrow and full of rage. She pointed at Elias and shouted in the old tongue, "The throne is sacred. The human must leave. This is a trick. This is madness." But the throne pulsed again. The ground answered her anger with a low sound like a warning. The lights grew brighter. The very walls of the palace seemed to lean toward Elias, as if shielding him. Silence fell again. No one dare move. A soft hum filled the room, and a voice returned not with sound, but with thought. It filled their heads, clear and powerful. The throne has waited for 3,000 years. It has scanned 1,000,000 minds. It has tested blood and code and spirit. None were worthy until now. They all heard it, even the doubters, even the ones who wanted to deny it. Even the speaker herself dropped her hand, her face pale, as if her own God had turned against her. Elias stepped down from the throne, his legs weak, the light around him fading, but not gone. Guards moved aside, nobles parted like waves before a storm as he walked through them, not sure where he was going, only knowing he could not stay here. Outside the palace, the skies had changed. The storm was gone, the air calm. The sun, returning ships, hovered nearby, watching. Sensors focused on him across systems, satellites, and probes recorded every second of his steps, every breath, every heartbeat. The image spread like fire. The human on the throne. The human who woke the machine of kings. The human who did what no one else could. Across the stars, people argued, shouted, prayed. Some threw down old flags. Others raised new ones. Some burned his name into metal walls. Others painted it on streets. Children asked their parents if they could be like the human too. Meanwhile, Elias was taken by the guards, not to prison, not to trial, but to a chamber deep beneath the palace where the old minds lived. These were not men or women, but pure intelligence, stored in crystal chambers, voices of the past, kept alive for advice, for judgment, for truth. They watched Elias with silent thought, long pauses between questions as they studied him, tested him, spoke to each other in fast clicks and flashes only they could understand. Finally, the oldest one spoke, its voice like wind through bone. "You are not supposed to be here." Elias nodded, not knowing what else to say, his hands still shaking. "You carry no bloodline. You are not trained. You did not seek this. You did not fight for it." Elias again gave no answer. "But you passed the trial without knowing it existed. You faced the throne without fear. You touched it with a heart not poisoned by pride or greed or hunger for power, and it chose." He looked up, eyes full of questions. "What does it want from me?" The mind replied, "It wants you to lead." He laughed without joy. "I am just a soldier. I fix things. I follow orders. I am not a ruler." "That is why it chose you," said the mind, "because you do not want the crown." Another voice entered the chamber, this one from a tall figure with blue skin and silver armor. She was Commander Varax, a leader of the Galactic Palace Guard, loyal to the throne above. All she had seen rulers rise and fall, but never like this. She bowed her head slightly and said, "The fleets await your command." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "I do not even know where they are." She stepped forward and placed a small crystal in his palm. It glowed with a warm light. The throne will teach you the systems, will listen. The empire needs direction. We need balance, or the darkness will return. He wanted to run, he wanted to wake up, and find himself back in his bunk on the old supply ship with nothing to worry about but cargo and fuel. But deep inside, he knew he could not go back. Something had changed, something had called him. He closed his eyes and saw stars not like before, but close, real, full of motion and color, as if the throne had opened a part of his mind he never used before. He felt planets spinning and ships drifting and people crying out for something new. And in that moment he knew. He could not walk away. He would not. The throne had chosen a ruler not for power, not for fear, not for tradition, but for hope. Elias was not meant to be there. But maybe he was exactly what they needed. And the galaxy would never be the same again. News spread faster than light across the known galaxy. The star throne had awakened, and its chosen ruler was a human named Elias, the Council of Nine, who had ruled the empire since the throne fell silent, met in a secret chamber on a moon wrapped in flame and shadow, their faces grim, their voices hard. "This is an insult," said the warlord of Tyrene, his massive body wrapped in dark metal armor, his red eyes burning with hate. The throne must have malfunctioned. No system would ever choose a human. "This is a trick," said the High Seer of Ilex, with her 6 glowing eyes spinning in different directions. "The humans must have hacked the core. They sent this Elias to steal what belongs to us." "This is prophecy," said the quiet one from the water world of Dren, who had never spoken in 500 years, and now his voice echoed like thunder. Maybe the throne truly found its king. The others shouted, the chamber roared, lights blinked, weapons hummed, fingers pointed, voices cracked. But none could change what had already happened. The throne had made its choice, and the galaxy was watching. On Velker Prime, the Crystal Palace stood in silence around Elias, who now lived in the upper wing once used by long-dead rulers. He walked its halls without guards. He spoke to no one. He spent his time listening to the throne that still whispered in his mind, not with words, but with feelings, shapes, visions, as if teaching him a new language written in stars. He saw ancient wars fought over pride and greed. He saw planets turned to ash by those who sat on the throne before him. He saw the last ruler fall screaming into the void as the throne rejected him and sealed itself for all time. Elias knew he was different, not better, not stronger, just different. He asked questions. He waited before speaking. He listened to the old voices stored in crystal walls and deep towers, and he wrote his thoughts in a small notebook made of real paper, a thing rare in a world of light and code. But the council would not sit still. They sent drones to spy on him. They sent spies wrapped in cloaks of thought. They tried to poison his food, but the palace itself stopped them. The systems, once asleep, now moved with a purpose, protecting him, guiding him, shaping him. Ships hovered above the planet. Every day, more came, some filled with fear, some with curiosity, some with silent hope that maybe, just maybe, this human would do what no one else could. Then came the day the council made its move. A fleet of black warships appeared in orbit, their hulls covered in ancient runes, their weapons charged, their engines silent, as Death, the leader of the fleet, was carved into the iron jaw, a being of pure, who had once burned 5 moons to dust just to make a point. He sent a message across all channels. "The throne is ours by blood, by right, by strength. This human does not belong. I give him 1 hour to step down, or I will destroy the palace and burn the planet beneath it." The message ended. The galaxy waited. Inside the palace, Elias stood at the top of the steps leading to the throne room. He wore no crown, no armor, only his old uniform from Earth, patched and worn. The wind blew through the broken windows, birds flew above the towers, and the people gathered below. Aliens of many kinds stood side by side, watching with wide eyes, wondering if the human would flee or fight or surrender. Elias raised his hand and spoke into the wind, his voice calm and clear. "I did not ask for this. I do not claim power. I do not want war. But I will not leave. The throne chose me, not to conquer, but to protect, and I will protect." The palace lit up again. Light flowed through the walls into the sky, into space itself, and something ancient awakened deep underground. Long hidden chambers, open ships buried for centuries rose from the sands, engines, glowing wings wide. The fleet of the First Empire returned. They did not answer Kraven, they did not threaten or boast. They simply moved into formation and pointed their weapons at the invaders. Kraven laughed a sound like stone breaking. He ordered the attack. The battle began. Fire rained from the sky, shields flared, energy roared. The people on the ground screamed and prayed and ran for cover. Elias stood still, eyes closed, letting the throne guide him. He touched a panel and spoke 3 words in a language he never learned. The old fleet answered with perfect unity. They moved like thought, they struck like lightning. Kraven's ships broke apart one by one, caught in traps laid long ago in the stars. The battle lasted only minutes. When it ended, the sky cleared, the smoke faded, and Kraven's command ship drifted powerless, its weapons gone, its engines cold. Elias opened a channel and said simply, "There is still time to change." Kraven stared at him from a shattered screen, blood on his jaw, hate in his eyes, but also something else, something new. Respect. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, people watched, and for the first time in centuries, they saw a battle end with mercy, not fire. They saw power used not for fear, but for peace. They saw a human chosen by something greater, standing not as a conqueror, but as a protector. And slowly, silently, worlds began to turn their eyes toward the Crystal Palace, not with fear, not with anger, but with hope. The Council of Nine met again, but their voices were lower, their eyes uncertain, their power cracked. The throne had spoken, and the human had answered. The battle was over, but the war inside Elias had just begun. He had faced a fleet and survived. He had spoken to the people, and they had listened, but now came the part no one had prepared him for, the part that no soldier training manual could explain, the part where he had to lead. He stood in the throne chamber, surrounded by walls that whispered memories and lights that shifted with his thoughts, and each hour the throne showed him more of its truth, more of its history, more of its pain. It had been silent for 3,000 years, and now it poured everything into him, as if trying to catch up all at once. He saw the birth of the empire from a world of storms and fire, where the first builders shaped the throne from fallen star and gave it the ability to learn, to judge, to wait. He saw great kings and queens who ruled with wisdom, and then those who ruled with fear. He saw how power slowly poisoned even the brightest minds, how greed spread like rust, and how finally the throne refused them all and sealed itself away. Elias walked the palace halls alone, his thoughts heavy, his steps slow. Sometimes he would stop by the great windows and watch the sky, wondering if the stars had always looked so close, or if the throne had changed the way he saw everything. He ate little and slept less. He spent hours in the learning chambers where floating screens showed him alien laws, forgotten treaties, failed governments, and maps. So old the stars had moved since they were drawn. He studied not because he wanted power, but because he feared what might happen if he made a mistake. The throne sent him guides, not people, but minds preserving crystal memories of leaders and builders and warriors. They came to him one by one, speaking in calm tones, teaching without pride. One memory showed him how to calm a planet on the edge of rebellion with only words and presence. Another taught him how to balance trade between 5 species with different needs and bitter histories. A third warned him of the shadow systems, where silence meant danger, not peace. Among these voices was one different, colder, sharper. It called itself Unit 12. Once an advisor to the last true emperor, it spoke in logic and exact numbers and had no room for feelings. It told Elias, "You are human, and that makes you unstable, but it also makes you unpredictable, and that is what the throne desires." Elias asked, "Why me? Why not one of them? Why not someone born for this?" The unit replied, "Because you ask questions, and that is the first sign of a ruler who will not become a tyrant." Still, Elias doubted himself. He had fought battles, but never ruled people. He had fixed engines, but never guided empires. He had seen loss, but never held the fate of billions in his hands. One day he walked through the Hall of Kings, where the statues of ancient rulers stood tall, their faces carved in stone, their eyes empty. He stopped at one with broken arms and a cracked crown and asked the AI guide, "Who was this?" The voice answered, "The first emperor who chose war over peace and died with no one to bury him." Elias touched the stone and felt the cold echo of choices made long ago, and he whispered, "I will not become this." He turned his attention to the people, not just nobles and soldiers, but farmers, traders, healers, children. He opened the gates of the palace, and invited them in not for shows or speeches, but to ask them questions to hear their stories, to learn from them. They came slowly, at first unsure of the strange human king, but soon the halls filled with voices, laughter, worry, hope. An old miner told him how taxes crushed his village, and Elias ordered the system changed. A young girl drew pictures of her dying moon, and Elias sent engineers to restore its core. A merchant begged for safer trade routes, and Elias reopened old patrol lines with ancient ships now loyal only to him. Each act was small, but the people saw, and word spread. The human listens, the human learns, the human acts. Outside the palace, some still plotted, the council whispered, and watched, waiting for him to fall, to make one wrong move, to show weakness. Elias knew this, and he trained not with swords or guns, but with thought, with reason, with patience. He studied languages until he could speak to every species without a translator. He learned their customs so he could greet them with respect, not pride. He read their stories so he could understand what they feared and what they loved. He asked the throne, "What is the heart of a ruler?" And the throne replied, "To protect without chains, to lead without shadow, to serve without name." Each night, Elias sat on the throne and closed his eyes, letting its presence guide him through the web of stars where danger still lived and hope still flickered. He saw pirates gathering on the edge of the void and sent a message before they moved. He felt famine rising on a frozen world and sent warmth before they asked. He heard silence from a system that should have sung and sent peace before war could begin. Time passed, though no one knew how much, for the throne warped space and thought, and Elias changed with it, not into something new, but into something clearer, not above the people, but among them. He never wore the crown kept in the vault, never ordered statues or banners with his face, never called himself emperor or king. He said only, "I am Elias, and I am here for you." And slowly the galaxy began to believe. Peace never lasts forever, and even the light of a new age must face its first shadow. While Elias brought hope to the galaxy, others saw weakness in his kindness and softness in his silence. In the cold reaches of the outer systems, a name began to rise from the ashes of a forgotten warlord, a name that made old generals stiffen and young soldiers tremble. Kravax the Unbroken. Once a prince of the shattered Varn Dominion, now a warlord with ships stolen from dead fleets and soldiers pulled from the edge of despair, Kravax had waited in silence, watching the chaos around the throne, waiting for the empire to fracture, waiting for a reason to strike, and now he had won. He did not believe the throne had chosen Elias. He did not believe a human could ever rule the stars. He believed only in strength, only in conquest, and only in fire. And so he gathered his fleet and lit the banners of war. Elias knew before the first scout ship vanished. The throne whispered danger, the sky dimmed, the stars warned him, and the ancient systems pulsed with alarm. But he did not raise shields, he did not call for armies. He walked to the edge of the palace walls and looked up at the stars, knowing something was coming that would test not his strength, but his soul. Kravax sent a message across every channel in every language of every species. The throne has been stolen by a soft creature who hides behind mercy. I come not to ask, but to take. I will burn the crystal palace and crush this human beneath his own crown. The people panicked. Some fled planets, others locked their skies. Some called for Elias to run, to hide, to let the council fight in his place. But Elias stood alone in the throne room, his hands on the ancient arms, his mind linked with the machine that once ruled all, and he asked, "What must I do?" The throne answered, not with weapons, not with hate, but with doors. Old doors hidden in forgotten places deep under the palace opened, and from them rose ships long lost to time, ships without named, ships without cruise, ships built not for war, but for balance, and each one turned its eyes to Elias, waiting not for orders, but for purpose. He stepped forward and spoke one sentence that no one expected. "We will not attack first." The war began not with fire, but with silence. Kravax arrived at the edge of Velker Prime, his fleet dark and wide, his voice loud and cruel. He demanded surrender, and when no answer came, he opened fire, not at the palace, but at the city below, where farmers lived, where builders worked, where children played. Screams rose from the ground, fire filled the sky, the shield shook, and the people cried out not for vengeance, but for help. Elias heard them all. He walked through the flames, untouched the throne's energy around him like a shield, and from his mouth came words spoken in the first language of the galaxy, words that had not been heard in 3,000 years. The ruler stands. The sky changed. The old fleet moved. Not fast, not loud, but with perfect order. Ships took positions without command systems, linked without code, weapons hummed with power, not fueled by rage, but by duty, and the battle began. Kravax laughed, and threw everything at the palace, missiles, plasma, drones, screaming through the sky, but none could pass the old shields, none could touch the throne, and when Elias raised his hand, the sky answered. The enemy ships were not destroyed, they were disabled, their engines turned off, their weapons silenced, their systems confused and frozen. The throne's fleet did not kill, they protected not with death, but with design. Kravax screamed in rage and sent his command ship forward, aiming straight at the palace, at Elias, at the heart of everything. Elias did not move. The throne reached out across space and caught the ship in a grip of invisible force. It dragged the monster vessel down through the clouds, past the towers, past the gates, and laid it gently in the great square before the people. The doors opened. Kravax stepped out, armor cracked, blood on his face, fury in his eyes. He roared a challenge, a duel, a fight to the death. Elias stepped forward unarmed, wearing only his old uniform, his hands empty, his eyes calm. They faced each other, one full of hate, one full of stillness, and the crowd held its breath. Kravax attacked with fire, with fists, with roaring metal, but Elias moved not with speed, but with understanding. Each strike dodged, each blow deflected, not to harm, but to teach. And then Elias spoke only 3 words. "You are free." Kravax fell to his knees, not from pain, but from truth. His army saw, and many dropped their weapons, their minds cleared by the light of what they had just witnessed. Elias turned and walked back to the palace, not as a victor, not as a hero, but as a man who had done what he must. The people stood in silence. Then in waves they knelt, not to a god, not to a king, but to a ruler who had defended them without hate, who had fought without blood, who had won without war. And across the stars leaders and soldiers watched and whispered, "This is not weakness, this is something stronger." The first challenge had come, and the human had not only survived. He had changed the meaning of power. Change does not happen in one moment, even when the throne awakens and a warlord kneels, even when the stars themselves turn their gaze toward a new name. The old ways do not die quietly, and those who built their power on fear do not surrender with smiles. They wait in shadows, whisper in dark halls, gather in silence, and still they hope the human will stumble. But Elias did not stumble. After the battle, the world expected parades and speeches, but he gave none. Instead, he walked through the burned streets, helped lift broken stones, listened to mothers who had lost children, and held the hands of those who had lost homes. He asked the builders what they needed. He asked the farmers what they feared. He asked the children what they dreamed. He did not sit on the throne unless he must. He slept in the worker quarters, not the royal chambers. He shared food with guards and guests alike. And soon the people began to talk, not with fear, not with doubt, but with something rare in the stars, with trust. On a cold mining moon where machines had not worked in decades, Elias sent power from the throne, and the mines came alive, glowing veins of light spreading beneath the ice, and the workers cried and danced. On a water world poisoned by greed, he sent healers and engineers, and within days, clean rivers flowed again, and fish returned to blue currents. In a system forgotten by every map, he opened trade routes protected by the ancient fleet, and merchants wept as their ships passed safely for the first time in years. The empire began to shift, not from orders, but from example. Governors who had ruled with iron were removed, not with war, but with truth. Their crimes revealed, their faces shown to the people, and they were given trials, not executions, because Elias believed justice must never look like revenge. Old AI networks buried beneath ruined cities were reactivated, and they sang songs of balance and renewal, for they remembered the last time the empire was whole. Still, some did not accept. The Council of 9, fractured. 4 members fled to unknown space. 3 resigned in shame. 2 remained silent and watched. The old symbols of rule were removed from the palace, and in their place Elias placed a single circle open at the center, a mark with no top, no bottom, a reminder that power was not above the people, but among them. In secret meetings on distant moons, old warlords planned rebellions, but the people did not join. In private channels, the rich tried to bribe his envoys, but the envoys returned the gifts untouched. In hidden bunkers, assassins waited for a chance, but the throne itself warned Elias with a single word spoken only in his mind: danger. And always he answered not with fear, not with force, but with something far harder: to kill with purpose. He trained new leaders not in war, but in peace. He sent diplomats instead of fleets. He replaced taxes with service and let planets shape their own laws within the circle of respect. And the galaxy changed. Songs were written not in praise, but in truth, and one song reached the edge of known space, a song sung by children in every tongue that said the human listens and the throne hears. The throne, too, had changed its light, now softer, its hum steady, its knowledge flowing freely to those who asked with honest hearts. In the great library once locked to all but the highest blood, Elias opened the doors, and knowledge poured out: blueprints, histories, medicine stories of every kind, and people came from every corner to learn, not to conquer, but to grow. In the Temple of Winds, where prophets once spoke only to kings, Elias walked barefoot and listened to the wind as if it were equal to the throne, and the wind carried his silence across the stars. On the day of echoes, a tradition once lost, he invited every species to speak one truth before the throne, and the hall filled with voices, none louder than the others, none silenced. An elder from the Dalkari said, "My world has known nothing but chains, and now it knows rest." A pilot from Earth said, "We were always told we were last, and now we are part of the first." A child from no known place said, "You make me feel safe." And Elias listened to them all, but not all were moved. In the black veil beyond the mapped stars, something stirred, not anger, not pride, but fear, for in the rise of one who ruled with heart, those who fed on hate found themselves starving. They began to move quiet and cold, seeking cracks in the peace, waiting for the human to fall to pride, to power, to time. And the throne knew. It whispered again to Elias, but this time the words were different. "The storm is not over." He did not flinch. He gathered the stewards from every system and spoke plainly: "The peace we build must have roots, or will be blown away. The hope we offer must have shields, or will burn. We must stand not because we are strong, but because others cannot." They nodded, and from that day, the empire was no longer ruled, it was carried by many. And though Elias still sat on the throne, when needed his face was not on the banners, his name was not sung. As a god, his image was not burned into stone. Instead, there was the circle, and within it the people, and around it the stars, and above it only sky. And in the silence between systems, something watched and waited and wondered. How long can peace truly last? Years passed like leaves drifting through light, seasons of calm wrapped around the stars, as the galaxy slowly learned a new way to breathe, no longer ruled by fear, no longer chained by tradition, but moving together towards something gentle, something strong, something shared. Elias never called himself king. He never wore gold, never carved statues of his face, never demanded silence when he walked, and yet his name echoed across systems, spoken in homes and halls and temples and towers, and songs hummed by children who had never known war. The throne remained silent unless asked. It no longer burned, or punished, no longer tested, or warned, only guided with a soft voice in the mind, a whisper of balance, a reminder of truth. Elias grew older, though the throne had slowed time for him. Lines formed near his eyes, marks not of sorrow, but of memory, each one earned through choice, through burden, through listening. He walked through fields of flowers on moons once buried in ash. He climbed the mountains of the ice worlds where storms once ruled, and now birds flew free. He sat beneath the stars with soldiers and students, with leaders and builders, and always he asked the same question: what do your people need? His answers were not always easy. Some choices brought pain, some cost sleep, but never life without reason, and never silence without thought. On the edge of known space, a signal arrived, a call from a race never seen, Never spoken, never known their language, was music, their ships shaped like shells glowing with ocean light. They had watched from afar, waiting to see if this human would bring flame or healing, and now they came forward with a gift. They offered a seed, one that could grow in space, bloom in air, and feed whole worlds, and Elias planted it in the Garden of Peace at the Palace Center, where water from every system flowed into one pool, and from that moment, the garden never stopped growing. Old enemies began to visit worlds that once turned weapons on each other, now turned soil together to plant food for those with none. Cities once guarded by walls, open gates, painted with the circle symbol, and across the stars markets and schools and halls of art were filled with voices that once shouted in fear, now laughing in peace. But peace is not the end, it is the beginning, and Elias knew the shadows still waited, watching and learning. Not all hands had opened, not all knives had been thrown away. Some still dreamed of thrones that bled and crowns that crushed. One day, a young alien girl was brought to the palace. She had crossed 10 systems alone, riding old freight haulers, and walking across frozen plains. Her eyes wide, her clothes torn. She carried nothing but a broken necklace and a piece of paper with the word help written in her own language. Elias met her at the gate. He knelt not above her, but beside her, and asked her name. She said nothing, only stared with fear and wonder, as if he were not real, as if this place could not be true. He reached into his coat and gave her a warm drink and a soft blanket, and then sat quietly waiting, letting her speak when she was ready, letting her silence be her safety. And in time she whispered 3 words. They took everything. From her came a story of slavers who ignored the new laws, who worked in the silence between systems where no one looked. She spoke of others taken, of families lost, of pain hidden behind smiling faces in rich cities. Elias listened with eyes that burned not with hate, but with promise. And he stood and turned to the throne, and the throne responded not with anger, but with focus. Across the stars, a wave of light moved. Systems that had forgotten the cost of looking away were reminded. Ships that had slept woke with fire, but this fire was clean. It did not scorch, it exposed, it did not burn, it revealed. Within days, the network of slavers was broken, not by bombs, but by truth. Their names spoken, their faces seen, and those they had taken returned to worlds that held them with tears and songs. The girl was given a home, not behind walls, but among friends, and each year she planted a new tree in the Garden of Peace, her way of saying, I am still here, and I am still growing. Elias watched and smiled, each time knowing the galaxy was not perfect, but it was alive and learning. As the seasons turned, the palace began to open wider, more halls unlocked, more chambers lit, and in one forgotten room, deep beneath the throne, a door opened for the first time in 5,000 years, and behind it stood a mirror, not of glass, but of energy. Elias looked and saw not himself, but every face he had met, every voice he had heard, every hand he had held, and the throne spoke once more. The ruler is the reflection of those he serves. He stepped away and walked through the halls for what felt like the 1,000th time, but this time each step felt softer, each wall more familiar, each light warmer. In the final hour of that day, he stood on the highest balcony and looked at the stars, and they did not feel cold or far. They felt near, like family watching from across the dark, waiting for his next word. But Elias said nothing. He only smiled. And in that silence, the galaxy knew the throne was no longer just a seat of power. It was a promise made by action, held by humility, shaped by service. And the promise was kept, not through war, but through one human who dared to sit, and then dared to stay,